Alrighty guys, so what we're going over today is we're going to be going over 3.17, a little bit earlier, right? And we're going to be going over Wintertide Brands. I'll give you the TLDR of why we're making this video. I didn't originally want to make it a video, I kind of wanted to save this for later, but we were making a league start guide, and then I realized that basically Wintertide Brand is garnering a lot of attention, and then basically someone in my chat explained it to me that, you know, two big streamers who won't be named will basically, you know, obviously playing the build, and that's created a lot of hype. And then basically a bunch of small streamers have now, you know, latched on for dear life and basically making build guides about them. And naturally, second that happens, the POBs start fluffing up, and you know, we start selling unrealistic expectations. We basically oversell and underdeliver. That's what happens, right? This is PoE. This is nothing new. But what we're going to do today is we're going to go into what makes a good league starter, right? Can you league start this build? And basically, you know, what are the downfalls, the real downfalls, and I want to explain that to you. Alrighty, guys. So first thing I want to talk about is basically what is a league starter in my opinion. A league starter is a build focused on very basic gear, capable of up to tier 16 maps, and conquerors with a minimal amount of experience required to play. So in this very sense, right, Wintertide Brand would actually succeed here, right? So there's actually no question about it. Can you league start Wintertide Brand? Yes, and one of the biggest changes to that is obviously the masteries on trees. So before, right, the problem with, and you know, technically in a lot of ways still would be, is when it comes to the tree, things like Holy Conquest or the brand mastery that basically gives you Holy Conquest, you used to have to wait till level 70 to use. So prior to 3.16, brands were basically useless. Not only were they weak and really hard to start, unless you could get the cluster jewels, you could not really play these builds effectively. God forbid during the leveling process. So like the single target damage was shit, the clear was shit. Everything was really bad about it, right? And now, this has obviously been made a lot better by the fact that you can, at the start of this thing, basically rush straight down here and grab the brand mastery, get the additional brand, like, much better tree, much more friendly for something along the lines of, brands, right? Especially Wintertide Brand. So now, that's why it's got a bit of hype behind it. If you're wondering why it didn't before, and now it does, the TLDR is, back in the day especially, every single time you tried to build brands, without cluster jewels, it wouldn't work. The first expense of the build was 20x worth of cluster jewels because all the jewels you'd be using were the same on every single pair of brands, which is why brands were never really a budget, let alone good league starter. Right? The next thing we're going to talk about here in the notes, stuff like that, is basically gear must be solid self-found and realistic. No catalyst, no influence gear, no jewels, no clusters, because the second we start talking about that, right, you're going to say, this is part of my budget league starter. Your budget's going to be full of shit. It's just not real, right? So I use no influence gear, no catalyst if I can, no jewels, no clusters. I don't mind one anoint. We also avoid enchants, by the way. Enchants are such fucking bullshit bait, man. Like, think about this, okay? Let me just put some perspective. I tell you, go get the Wintertide Helm enchant. Like, I have it in the POB. Then there's a bunch of hype behind it. What do you reckon happens to that price immediately? There's not day one, you know, lab farmers. Well, there is, right? But they're not charging no money, especially if they know that there's a lab enchant worth a fortune because everyone's trying to play it. They're going to charge you out the asshole for it. Where's that money come from? Yet again, not from your league starter, because your league starter is meant to be budget. Okay, so I don't do helm enchants, and I try and avoid golden oil anointments if I can, right? Sometimes they're worth it, but other times they're not. Gold oils are obviously really expensive at the start of the league. If you can get them super early sometimes, it's not bad. Maybe you get lucky on the drop. But for the most part, avoid golden oil. It's 3 times the price of a silver oil or an opalescent, whatever it is. Right? That's basically the restrictions I put on myself. So, in a lot of ways, if you see other POBs, you'll notice that they have all this shit done, right? Next thing I want to talk about is basically the damage on this build. So we're going to go down here, right? I just have like a little quick ranking thing. Clear speed was good on this build. The single target was shit. And I made the defenses good, right? Everyone I know basically is going for a POB where essentially what they're doing is they're going for pure damage. And so if you didn't see that there, I had like maybe 600k or whatever. If you look at a damage version of it, it's about 1 mil. I'm going to go over basically the fluff and, you know, sort of why this isn't good. We're going to use another example of exactly what this is. And basically, we're just going to start unticking things. So I wrote a couple of notes. You know, obviously he promises a budget. Never promise budgets, man. Can't do it. And then we've also got things like permanent Vile Snap. Permanent Vile Cold Snap. Swift Affliction, which is terrible. +2 just to get your levels higher, which yet again, if you make a popular build guide, right? The price of that +2 goes through the roof. Then you're gonna what? Promise them that you can just keep buying tabbies for 20C a pop at day one and just corrupt them and you'll get it in no time? No, no, because then you're instantly gonna be 2x in debt. You know what I mean? Helm enchants, no good. Flask always ticked on. Show the damage setup. So I said this is not a problem. I don't mind the damage setup, but I do want to show it to you, right? Just to give you a realistic expectation. Influence gear, 20 stages is not realistic, is the big one I want to go over. A level 90 tree, as you guys know, man. Slowly over time, these trees are creeping up, guys. I've seen level 96 league starter trees, and I fucking roll my eyes to the back of my head like you wouldn't believe. And then naturally we got gem quality, right? So, first thing we're going to do over is, obviously, you do not have permanent Vile Cold Snap. I fucking hate you see it. It's included in the full DPS, right? So, you're promising 2 mil worth of damage. You don't have this. I'll be nice here and just give you the regular Cold Snap. Instantly, we've chopped 200k off the build. Instantly, we've chopped 2k off the build, right? So that's the first thing. Naturally, yet again, we got some quality gems here. A league start, man, you're using the gems that you get from the thing. It's not realistic. It's just not right. Anyway, then it's also including this in your full DPS. So when you press Cold Snap, it is a 1-button press and you're using it for the Bone Chill, right? So this is part of the setup. If you do not press this button, how much damage do you have, right? Because yet again, you're saying Wintertide is the skill, but we're using 8 different skills all at once, right? So first thing I want you to be aware of is that if you do not have Cold Snap up, which it is on a cooldown, and you are not constantly including it into your rotation, right, you do not have this damage. And we're going to go into why he doesn't have this in his rotation, technically, right? So 1, you are constantly keeping this up for your Bone Chill effect. That's the first thing. Next one, Vortex. Now, Vortex should be automated on a left click, right? And we're getting a bunch of damage from curses. As you guys know, though, curses are heavily reduced on bosses and stuff like that. I don't mind including this in the full DPS, right? It only adds a very minor amount. It's more about the curses. And if this is on a left click, it is up, right? It is up. But be aware of this, right? When you're using Vortex on a left click, if you do not hit with the actual Vortex and these curses are not up, yet again, you got your damage because the curses are not up, right? So this is yet again just worth mentioning. This is part of the setup damage, but it's far less egregious than the Cold Snap, especially a Vile Cold Snap at that, right? So yet again, I will leave this on for now, but I want you to be aware this is part of setup damage. Yep. So you basically don't have this. Same thing here. Frost Bomb. It's included in there, right? It's actually a massive chunk of your damage, and it needs to be replaced up every 4 seconds. And if you don't have it, yet again, your damage is significantly lower. So we went from 1.8 to 1 mil really quick when it comes to setup damage, okay? So there is a lot, and I repeat, a lot of setup damage in these builds, right? Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Wintertide brand here. So yet again, we have a 2020 here, 2120, my bad. And I want you to be aware of the default here, right? So default with quality is 10 extra multi. 10 extra multi is quite decent. Take this off, substantial amount of damage again, right? This is why using 2020 gems is a problem. Next thing I want to talk about, and this one's probably one of the biggest ones for me, is Swift Affliction. This is such an asshole move, it's not funny, right? So the less duration doesn't hurt it, provided you are using POB. Provided you are cheating, and this is one of the biggest damage increases you can get. It's 40% more damage over time. Really, really, really hard to beat, right? The problem with this is that, yet again, stages, okay? So I'm going to show you a quick little video here of basically cast speed. And what we're going to go over here is the rumors that basically when I'm using my Wintertide brand, I keep the stacks on the single target. Watch my ramp up here, see how it's slow and then it's speeding up, and then watch I put the new brand on and it slows right down, right? Wintertide brands do not keep stacks. When it says it keeps stacks, whenever it detaches and reattaches, it's referring to the individual brand keeps the stacks, right? And if it moves to another target, like a different target entirely, it won't lose stacks. The second it dissipates, it starts from the start again. You do not keep stacks, right? So if you reach 20 stages, right, but then you put on another brand, the next brand is not at 20 stages, okay? I cannot stress this enough, which means that, okay, so in the video, the guy basically talks about, what does he talk about again? He basically talks about if you can just make 20 activation stages, you're good. Your damage is actually this. Problem is that that's not true at all, right? You go in-game, it will tell you how frequently your activation brands go up. So I get one. By the way, I have cast speed on my wand, right? But basically, I get an activation, right, or a stage every 0.15 seconds, and the gem starts at 0.25, right? With just the cast speed I get on the tree, I get a bunch more. But if you add Swift Affliction and you just get 20, that means that only for the last 0.15 or whatever it is of your duration do you actually get the maximum damage. The way I basically want to describe this to you, right, is if you've got 20 activations per brand, exactly 20, right, you actually don't get all 20 stages. You actually only get 20 stages for the last 0.1 second of your brand, right? POB won't show you this, right? Because think about this, it's gaining activations per thing, right? So technically your damage will be lower. POB will not calculate this, right? So if I said 10 brands, look at my damage. It's half. He's only getting 5 activation brands, right? And I would gather off of his activation speed here, he gets 5 extra activations, right? Or 5 stages that will be at maximum, right? So when he says he's got 20, assuming he has remotely similar cast speed to me, which he doesn't, right? It would be basically got 6 extra stages at maximum damage. Let's just go into this real quick. Calculator out. You would have your activation speed, so it says it right down the very bottom there, activates every 0.15, and he gets 5 of those at best, right? So we got 0.15 times 5, he gets 0.75 of a second at maximum stages. And that maximum stages is where his actual damage comes from, right? Because all these things you add to your Wintertide brand are multiplied out by the amount of damage over time coming off the brand. So if I change the stacks here, right? If I change the stacks to 5, look at how bad my damage is. It doesn't matter that it's got Swift Affliction, LE Focus efficacy, because it's the gem multiplied out, right? Your base damage. So if you ever see Swift Affliction, right? And you only see 20 activation stages, understand this. You get your maximum damage for all of 1 second. This is not a good gem. Less duration is cancer on this fucking build. Absolute cancer. By the way, this guy has a pretty good wand with cast speed on it that helps him, you know, make this. He also has a +1 wand. I would not add that ever on a budget version because cold damage plus cold dot, right? Sorry. +1 to cold gems, cast speed, and cold dot is actually a really, really good wand, right? It is actually really good. You sit there and say it's only a 3 prop, but I guarantee you now that people are looking for those, the price goes through the roof. TLDR anyway, right? But all your damage comes from stages, which means that cast speed, right, and duration are your #1 scalers, because if you're ever not at 20 stages, you do not have this damage, right? And this resets per brand on every single boss, okay? This is the biggest criticism I have of a lot of these builds, is they are not explaining the mechanic, and they are overselling you on damage, right? The one thing I want to show you here is basically, despite all this damage, your damage is significantly lower than this, right? Significantly lower. Getting more activations per brand is a priority, and keeping the duration as long as possible is actually a priority, because the longer you're at 20 stages, the better your damage is overall. POB cannot calculate this because as far as POB is concerned, right, you have 20 stages the second you put down your brand, which is not how the brand works at all. The brand ramps up and then maintains that damage for a very short period of time and then has to drop off unless you can scale your duration. You'll find out just through the tree alone that you do not have a great deal of duration. You're normally going to need cluster jewels and a bunch of other things to fix that up. Swift Affliction gives you the most damage based on if you were just going for 20 brands and then you put in 20 stages, bang, your damage is fluffed. Alright, so I want to go over that straight away. Every single time you see this, it is garbage, alright? Cast speed is important, duration is important. If you see Swift Brand, delete the POB. It is not realistic, alright guys? We're not even going to go into the config or keep going with, you know, dismantling this POB. But that's the notes I wrote about it. Obviously, a lot of stuff here wrong with this. A lot of setup damage, and most importantly, didn't get the 20 stages right. Swift Affliction is a bad gem link, guys. It might look better in POB, it might look better on PoE Ninja. It is fucking garbage for this build, alright? You want to keep the duration. We use a different setup, right? Anyway, what you can actually expect, right, is that You can still get very, very reasonable damage. We still have to use the same thing here, right? I'll be unclicking this on mine, right? But basically, you don't include your Cold Snap, right? In the full DPS or your Frost Bomb or anything like that, right? But it's still set up damage. Drop it a little bit, right? And you can turn this off. Damage is lower. But what I can tell you is that if you actually, like, look at your tree, you get a majority of the same part here. You have to grab this one, right? And you have to grab this one because they're your two most important nodes in the entire game. You want these bonuses. You want the Holy Conquest, otherwise the skill doesn't work, and you want attachment range because brands feel garbage without it. The LDR here is your tree will look like this part no matter what you do here. And rather than go out here and stretch for this fake damage that you're not really getting, invest in the defenses. You will have a much better time because rather than dying every 2 seconds and relying on player skill cap, you can just make an overdone build with a budget with significantly worse gear, right? Like just damage over time and crafted spell, and still do just as good. You can get a farmable Magnet Eclipse, and you can use the first version Invictus first. Rhyme Gaze, you can just use a Saint Chainmail. It's not really a big deal. I actually use a this is budget thing I have on right now. This is just to get me stats, by the way, so I'm not even getting the full damage over time. These are just magic rings. That is literally life and res and nothing else. Like, it's all garbage. This increased critical strike does nothing. No special rolls. That's a regular Rhyme Gaze that I had lying around, and just a wand that I picked up off the ground. Notice it doesn't have a +1, right? The same deal here, man, and it has cast speed. Cast speed, crafted spell damage, right? Far more realistic. You will actually have more damage if you can buy a nice Ami, right? And then obviously you can start going to influence gear later, but that's not budget. Right? So the TLDR here is, yeah, oh yeah, I was also just using a Kingsguard. Incredibly cheap, by the way. Incredibly cheap. I use it purely for life and ES and armor. That's it. We do also, by the way, generate endurance charges. I don't have this on in the POB, but because of that, whenever they expire, I get a little bit of health back as well. And how we're generating them is by being basically block capped, by the way. Basically block capped, I'm pretty sure it should show. 75 block, and then 75 spell block with glancing blows, which is really, really good. Then we take deflection, 25% chance to gain endurance charge on block. Much better tree, ridiculous amount of EHP. The ES synergizes with your ascendancy, which gives you back ES recharge on kill and stuff like that. So that's basically your ascendancy point right here, Vile Bastion. Making the most use of hybrid, and then because of the way we do the tree, we get some extra aura effect. That aura effect allows us to fit in 4 of the best auras you can get, right? Which is clarity, so we don't have to ever worry about mana. We can't actually run out. Malevolence, you know, go figure. Best damage, skill effect duration, which is huge. Termination, we actually get, I think 13k armor or something like that. It's not fully leveled. And then discipline, obviously, for a rather large ES pool, right? And then basically we can spam all of our skills. So when we're not reliant on anything, right? We're not reliant on a mana flask or any silly shit like that. Which means if I don't have the DPS, which we really don't, the build won't fall off. I can infinitely spam this and infinitely last as long as I need against bosses. I have a little bit of footage here to basically prove with this very same concept. We also did, yeah, so this is just us against the Minotaur. And here you can see how shit the damage is, right? I want you guys to just be aware of this, right? The damage is bad, but I can also just sit here and face tank Minotaur. Granted, this is a white map, right? Because I want you guys to understand this. As soon as map mods come into the fray, we're tanky enough to survive this. If you're playing a damage version and, you know, you're promised double this damage on paper, right? Which isn't really the case. You're going to be sadly mistaken if you're thinking you're doing this any faster, right? We can at least tank the damage and indefinitely fight this boss, right? We can actually infinitely sit here and just face tank the Minotaur, and that's what I really wanted to showcase in this, which is you are better off going for defenses and dropping from 1 mil POB DPS or 900 to 600, right? But have that, or 680 or whatever, and have that 680 be consistent because I'm not worried about dying in one hit. I've got plenty of HP. Don't even worry, I don't even have Flask sorted out on this build, right? I don't even have that. And I'm able to sit here and tank the Minotaur, right? Far better setup and way more new player friendly. Alright guys, so we're approaching on this build guide going too long. But the things I wanted to go over, right, is the build is a perfect league starter in every single definition, right? It's cheap. It's farmable. It definitely can do tier 16s and Conquerors. I killed all the Conquerors, by the way. So I've killed all the Conquerors, all the Guardians. I can kill Shaper and I can kill Cyrus. They're painfully slow, right? And that is that is basically the TLDR here is, it does deliver as a league starter. What they are overselling you is the damage, and that's the part that I don't agree with, right? So, what I wanted to do in this video is basically say, is Wintertide brand a league starter? Yep. Is it good and new player friendly? Yep. Is the guides out there up to scratch? No. Is the damage way worse and you know, the POB calculations all wrong? Yep. They're all shit, right? So the long story short is mostly stages are all bullshit, okay? Mostly stages are all bullshit. So even on mine, I've got 26. That's not including the car speed I have. If you throw on 20 car speed, I've got like 30. I actually get my full duration. I use a different gem setup, and now you know why. I use way less setup damage, and if you wanted to, you know, compare the POBs here, he's saying 1.8 mil, which you can very quickly debunk. I would say 760 or whatever, right? Like, even if you want to, man, you can take stuff from his POB. I don't even include frenzy charges. I don't include anything, man. I literally say, is the enemy chilled? Oh, and I have 3 brands on the enemy. That is it. That is the whole thing here. We're all using this 180% more damage thing, which is all bullshit anyway, because you don't have the 20 stages. But I just want to go over, guys, what was real in those POBs and what isn't. The TLDR, okay, it is a good league starter. It's far more built for hardcore than it is anything else, right? Single target is bad, and most people would fail it. If you don't care about damage, that's fine. Its clear speed is average. It's pretty good, man. Actually, I really like the clear speed. I like the playstyle. Its defenses can be made good. If you go a pure damage POB, you will have shit damage. I promise you, you will still have shit damage, and then you'll have to be good at the fights. Because that little bit of extra damage, even if you doubled my damage, right? Even if you doubled my damage, you're still having to fight the boss. If you don't go defenses, you are going to have a much worse time. Okay? Especially if you're a new player and you can't do it. Hopefully that helps, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, man. I'll be making my League Starter version available, obviously. So, obviously, it includes a detailed guide. I still recommend people play this. It is a viable League Starter as far as it goes. It definitely works on a budget. I think you're better off going defenses than offense. Get as much as you can. Tree is really simple. Gear is definitely budget-friendly. And then, obviously, if you want to go into the better versions, like mid-tiers and stuff, you will be going low life. You will start getting expensive gear. And the damage at best is like 5 mil in the end game. You can fluff it up and get 10 and 8 and stuff like that. But the TLDR is you're going low life. It will be expensive, right? It's kind of a no-brainer there, and that's what you need to bring to the into the end game. Or you could use this as a leveling tree and then transition into either a Storm brand or something else, because obviously these brand nodes are the most important. Brands are still really good. They're obviously made much better by no longer needing cluster jewels. Cluster jewels will be your next area where you basically can either come out here, you can come over here, whatever you want, right? Like, pretty easy to get cluster jewels going on this. But the TLDR is the second you start adding cluster jewels, you are definitely adding expense. Yeah, cluster jewels are expensive at the start. Thanks for watching. Peace out. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Catch you later, guys.